My family on one side is Indian, and I remember reading an article about people in India called street typists who would set up on a street corner with a typewriter, and they provided a public service of typing up documents for people. So if you needed a typed letter for legal purposes, or you wanted a typed job application or something like that, you could bring them your handwritten stuff, or you could dictate to them and they would type it out for you. And they used to be incredibly instrumental to the economy. But recently they've been superseded by computers and printers. Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was quite sad. And but that's where the idea came from. And it gestated over several years. I did a lot of research. I found that there are other people who do this, and I learned from them. And eventually I very tentatively started just busking on the street. I applied to festivals and so on and so forth. So it, like most of the things I do, it grew very slowly. Every day of the Fringe, when it was on back in the before times, I would feel absolutely terrified about going out there and having to like make space for yourself in this huge crowd of people, and then having to write to order on requests that could be anything. So yeah, no, I found it absolutely terrifying. But after it's been terrifying for about the first 10 or 15 minutes, it becomes fun, fairly reliably. So I've kept doing it for that reason. It's very much the sort of a one-on-one connection. It's very personal. It's very usually speaking to one person. There's quite often a little crowd of people around you who are sort of listening in and deciding if they want to give it a try or not. But when you're writing a poem, you're really speaking to that one person. But I think it's still a performance. It's just a one-on-one performance. And it's a very it's quite an intense quite an intense performance, at least from my perspective. I hope it's a bit more relaxing for the people who come and get poems. We started it when I was quite young. I think I was maybe 17 or so. Didn't really know what I was doing. I wanted something that would be challenging and interesting, and I hugely enjoyed reading things in literary magazines and sort of lit mag websites online. So it seemed like a natural choice to start a website where I would curate the kind of thing that I really enjoyed. And that's kind of been the guiding principle throughout, really. It's the stuff that I really enjoy that I don't necessarily see in other places. Yeah, and again, it's been quite a slow process of growth. So it started out as an online magazine, and eventually it migrated into print, and then migrated back, and then migrated back again slightly more permanently to print. And it's been, I don't think it's ever been on hiatus yet, but the publication schedule has changed, and I've started publishing chapbooks as well because there were longer things I wanted to publish. So yeah, it's changed and grown a lot over time. Yeah, I do find it quite difficult to describe what it is I'm looking for. I think it has developed a kind of mood of its own after quite a few years. And there's like a specific thing it's quite dark, it's quite weird, slightly dreamlike, that I know it when I see it, but I find it very difficult to describe. But yeah, like I say, like it's to me it's identifiable, and it's perhaps identifiable mainly because I will read something, I'll be like, yes, this, it feels right. I don't know, you could define it by length, couldn't you? It's something that's shorter than a novel. It's not quite as meaty or substantial as a novel, and probably shorter than a full poetry collection, but maybe longer than a pamphlet, depending on who you ask. Like a pamphlet might be, I don't know, like 8 or 10 poems, a single sitting. A poetry collection might be 3 or 4 or 5 sittings, and in the middle there's a chapbook, which is, I think, maybe 1 or 2 sittings you could comfortably read a chapbook in. The chapbooks are printed. I send them to a printer, and they're saddle stitched, or some of the longer stuff are perfect bound. But I also make some pamphlets as well, and those are the things that are handmade, and they're put in free with almost every order that I get. I put in a couple of these pamphlets, and usually they're made just through folding a single sheet of paper into a booklet, and they're like super short, super weird little bits of ephemera. One of them resembles a receipt that you'll just find in with your orders, but actually it's a poem. And one of them's a sort of timeline of a possible future. And so it's very strange, but very short little things that are all hand folded at great length. I think people are generally sort of delighted to find them. So I get a lot of feedback about that. People are like, this was a nice surprise. And yeah, but I mean, I don't really know what people do with them. I don't know where they end up. But one of the reasons why I do them is that I want to put a large quantity of physical artifacts out into the world, things that can just be on a shelf, on a bookshelf, on a coffee table, in a little bowl on a counter. Just I like the idea of having lots of small physical printed objects out there in the world. Yeah, like I really like the printed form, and a couple of times I've thought about it, because the print edition requires a huge amount of effort and a huge amount of time and energy to maintain. So a couple of times I've thought about like maybe could go digital, but I don't think I would find as much enjoyment in making something that was entirely digital. So I've kept it around for that reason, which is not financially sound and not sound in terms of the amount of effort and energy involved, but it's definitely important to me to have print stuff. In the first few years, I paid for it out of my own pocket, but now it funds itself. And it's all pretty good. Don't get any funding from any arts council or any funding body or anything like that. It's the magazine is paid for through subscriptions, purchases, and donations, which I like. Like it feels good. It feels like a positive thing to me that it's able to stand by itself. It's got enough readers, and it's got enough people are interested in it to allow it to stand by itself. Reviews of small press books, and lots of some bits of news, things like prize nominations for the magazine, and also just writing resources. And the writing resources are the thing that are the most popular. And again, like it's a thing that I find quite interesting. Like I keep a list of literary magazines in the UK. Literary magazines are something that I'm super interested in anyway. So I really enjoy the process of cataloging them and keeping track and seeing what's being published in all across the UK. And if other people find that useful, that's also fantastic.
Yeah.
There's been some real odd things. I think there was a literary magazine called Dirt Flask, which was made up of scrolls inside a glass bottle filled with earth. which I really liked, but I don't think they're around anymore, which is sad, but I love weird stuff like that. So I think the most important thing probably is to just sort of to have an idea of what it is that you do and what your writing is like, and have tastes and interests, and read widely, and sort of look for magazines that really suit what you enjoy reading. Like, first and foremost, I always think you should be guided by what you enjoy reading most of all. So like, look for magazines that you enjoy and read them, and see what other people are doing, and see what you find interesting, and see what you think works, and just sort of follow them on social media, that kind of thing. Because I think, like, what I used to I still do publish some of my work in literary magazines, and I enjoy it, but I do it a lot less intensely now. I think I used to be very intensely into it, whereas now I think it's much more important to me that I am having a good time and enjoying the process of sending things out for publication, and enjoying the process of publication. So I think, I think that's, like, engaging with literary magazines and finding ones that you really genuinely enjoy is probably the most important part, because it will help you work out what it is that you write. It'll help you work out where it fits in to, like, the conversation that's going on, and it will help you in all sorts of ways. I think sometimes people read literary magazines that they don't enjoy, or they submit their work to literary magazines that they don't enjoy, and I wonder why, because it will be a kind of hollow victory in the end, even if you do succeed in publication. Whereas if you find magazines that you really love, I think it's a much more positive experience. Um, so I see there was a while when a lot of people were writing stories set in lockdown, um, and poems about lockdown, and things like that, and that was very interesting. I love poetry as a means of recording history or speaking to history, particularly as it's happening. But I feel as though that's fallen away a little bit now. People aren't so much writing about the situation that is ongoing. But what I've noticed is a lot more people are see a lot more work from people who are completely new to writing and completely new to poetry, or are experimenting with different forms. They're trying something new, or they're more used to writing prose, but they're trying poetry now, which is great. It seems as though it's not an ideal situation necessarily. Like you say, everything's cancelled, everybody's stuck inside, but something good that's coming out of it is that people have the opportunity to engage with art in new ways, to try new things, to experiment. So, like, restrictions are more than ever kind of falling away. It used to be impossible to share your work with just the world at large, relatively cheaply and easily. But now you can have a website and you can do that. And like, we're developing new ways of sharing things all the time. So yeah, it's exciting. There's new possibilities cropping up all the time. The magazine is probably the thing I've published which reaches the largest number of people. But that does so because it's been around for a very long time. It's got a community around it. It's got a large mailing list. It's got it's got a website that ranks in Google and things like that. Which really I didn't know that I needed those things in order to make it successful. They just sort of happened over time. I stumbled into them just through blind persistence. So in terms of getting sales, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. Although try Facebook ads. Again, like a lot of what I am about is finding what works for you and is interesting for you. So if you have a practice that is interesting and fulfilling for you, it's very easy to go on doing it for 10 years. And if you go on doing it for 10 years, I think you do need to perhaps like have an eye on your analytics and an eye on how well things are performing and things like that, and an eye on what it is your audience likes and dislikes. But if you keep an eye on those things and you just keep doing the thing for a long time because you enjoy it and it's not a difficult thing to keep doing, it will work out eventually. Something where the formal elements are an important part of the piece. So prose, when you're presenting it, it can be reflowed, it can be arranged in any way you want, and it doesn't necessarily matter. Whereas poetry has formal elements that are very important to the way it's presented, and and rhythm and rhyme and things like that. So it's got formal qualities and it's got sonic qualities that play into it in some way. I don't know. There's a definite again, it's a wide remit of different things. There's poetry, there's fiction, there's short fiction, there's all sorts of things. But I think that I can definitely identify there is like an American literary character when it comes to short fiction that is quite recognizable and quite familiar. But I feel as though at least in terms of short fiction, which is what I mainly deal with, a British national literary character is much more difficult to pin down. And I think part of that is because short fiction is unfortunately like less well grounded in British culture. We don't have like a culture of short fiction. We do have a culture of poetry, but it's perhaps not as strong as it is in other countries, which is a shame. But another way of looking at that is that it's still it's still up for grabs. It's still possible to influence that and to build a national literary character. I think there's you can sort of separate things out into craft, which is how a thing is written on a line by line level, and story, which is the story that's being told. And something might have like a great story, but not much craft put into it, or it might have be very finely crafted, but not have a great story, or might focus on different elements of those. And so when you say writing technique, what I think of is the craft. It's like how elegant or well balanced or rhythmic or or whatever a sentence is, or a story or poem is, on a sentence by sentence or line by line level. And I think that has a huge amount of value. It's the texture from which the final product is made. So yeah, I think it's it's hugely important, but there are forms where it's not as well. There's an argument that in some literary contexts we value craft too much over story and imagination and the other things that go into creating a story or poem. And I mean, possibly in some contexts we do, and I think in some contexts we don't as well. Like I don't know. I'm very wavy about things because there are so many different ways of sharing things. There's so many different ways of publishing things. There are so many different ways of creating things But I think it's very important not to think that the literary scene is just this or just that, because it can start to feel terribly limited. When I did travel, what I noticed quite a lot was that like community is hugely valuable. So almost wherever I went in the world, I could find very near to wherever I was situated a writing group. And I think that shouldn't be underestimated as a kind of network that everyone who writes things has available to them. You can go to another country and you will be able to find your contemporaries, and you'll be able to go and network with them and meet them and hopefully make friends with them. And that's a structure that just so happens to exist, and has existed for many years. I think that's a super valuable thing, and part of what's important as writers is sharing your work with your contemporaries, and like building that community through the process of sharing the sort of pain and enjoyment of creating things with those people who are around you. So yeah, like going to another country and being able to go to a writers group and meet people instantly, it's amazing. Going to another country and going and being able to go to an open mic and hear people read their work and meet people who are creating things, is super valuable. It's something that I get a great deal of enjoyment out of, in terms of being a writer. It's one of my favorite things about it. I think it gets easier with time. I think that's one thing, and I think like any fear, you can probably practice the skills you need to get past it. So you might only feel comfortable sharing work with a few people, but do that and keep doing that until you maybe feel comfortable sharing with a few more. If you go to a writing group on a regular basis, you can go along and you don't have to necessarily share your work straight away, but it's you can work your way up to that, and just start with whatever you're comfortable with at the moment and work your way up, and hopefully that will be something that you get past if you want to, if that's what you want to do. It's also completely valid if you don't feel comfortable sharing your work and you just want to keep it for yourself and something for you to look at and you to look back on. All of that absolutely valid. It may be that you just get a great deal of joy out of creating something, and that's great. You may never look at it, you may never show it to another person, but the point of creating that thing was to get the joy that you got out of making it.